One of the most common questions for high school students applying to pre-med programs and people currently enrolled in pre-med programs in college is, what should I major in? I'm not here to waste any of your time. Let's get straight into the video because we have a lot of really great stuff to cover today. First, what is the likelihood of actually getting into med school after going through whatever X pre-med major you're going into? Secondly, how well does it actually prepare you for those key pre-med activities? Things like the MCAT, things like getting a good GPA or getting involved in research and volunteering. How well does the major equip you to go do those things? And third, lastly, what is the actual outlook for med school? At the end of the day, pre-med is just a 4-year phase. You still have to go to med school. You still have to live life as a doctor beyond that. How well is this major actually going to equip you to succeed? Keep all of these criteria in mind as we go about building our pre-med major tier list. Quick announcement, if you have an upcoming MMI, Casper, or BSMD interview, I've recently started consulting. So if you're interested in a one-on-one session with me where we'll go over questions and advice, tips, and potentially a mock interview, then feel free to reach out to me at pratik.self.improvement@gmail.com for more details. Enjoy the video. When it comes to engineering majors, understand that it is extremely difficult. These majors are not intended to be easy, and with that, it means that it is very time consuming. Now, as a pre-med major, understand that the extracurricular time you have outside of school in order to pursue other things like job shadowing, your ability to study for the MCAT exam, and when the time comes to, as an undergrad in your 4th year, apply to all these different med schools, it's very important to have this extra time. As an engineering major, you do not have free time like that. You're not going to have the ability to pursue these different very key extracurricular activities that you need in order to get into med school as soon as possible. And because of that, it's reducing your prospects here. It may take you an extra gap year or two in order to catch up to what these other biology majors or other life science majors who have a little bit less work are going to be doing. In addition to that, maintaining a high GPA is something that's very important for med school admissions. It's very similar to just doing college admissions in undergrad. GPA is one of the first things that they look at. As an engineering major, I understand, yes, it's not comparing apples to apples when you take engineering major and some other major, and med schools will see that. But at the end of the day, GPA is GPA. They want to see these high numbers. Engineering majors really do struggle, especially like with CS majors as well. Bro, these classes are hard. You see it firsthand when you go to college, especially with me going to a tech school, a BSMD program at RPI. I see plenty of CS majors and these struggles that they go to. It's not easy, trust me. Digging further into this, we need to think about some of the implications of being an engineering major. As a pre-med, you have to take the MCAT at some point. And with that, there's a bunch of concepts that you need to study for the MCAT. There's a section on biology, a section on chemistry, there's going to be some questions in psychology and physics, there's a critical reading and evaluation section. When it comes to engineering and its ability to prepare you for that, especially in comparison with some of the majors we're going to talk about later on, do you really think that the engineering concepts are going to be tested on the medical school entrance exam test? I'll give you the answer to that. No. There are some physics questions, sure, like by all means, but engineering prepares you so much deeper into those physics concepts that if you showed any of those questions to like a regular engineering major, they just kind of laugh it off because you've studied so much more than you truly need. Math concepts are something that don't really come up on the MCAT or later on in med school as well. So you're truly preparing yourself with knowledge that you are not going to need in the field. It doesn't benefit you, and yet you're spending so much more time, so many more resources in order to glean that knowledge. At this point, it would be a complete disservice of me to not explain some of the logic behind why I'm even starting this video off with engineering majors. Here's the deal. A lot of the time that people go into engineering for pre-med is not because they have some like weird future vision of how they're going to connect engineering and medicine and research. It's simply because they want a backup plan for medicine. We all know that becoming a doctor, especially in the United States and really anywhere, is not an easy task. It takes gap years, there's some level of risk involved, and so people think that, okay, if I do an engineering major, and let's say I'm applying to med school, and I apply for 2-3 years, and I never get in, well then at least now I have an engineering major as a backup in contrast to having a biology major. And obviously if you have like a CS degree, it's going to have greater prospects than biology. If med school just doesn't work out, you can take your bachelor's degree in CS and go earn 200, 300K a year starting salary if you work in some of these like integrated machine learning finance companies. Unfortunately, the truth is, it's not that straightforward. It's simply not. Because the issue that you will run into is that as an engineering or CS major, you will not have the free time in order to do everything else that you need to. And as a result of that, you're going to be forced into taking more gap years in order to compensate for the work. You might need to take your MCAT exam again because you weren't able to spend enough time preparing the first time, and as a result, your score is not high enough to get into some of these good quality med schools. In addition to that, you're going to start stacking up those gap years to kind of catch up to these biology majors. Remember that as an engineering major, you don't necessarily have an advantage, something like special or unique when you apply to med school because you're an engineering major. Med schools are looking at this very objectively, like, okay, we have 2 candidates applying to us. This engineering major is lacking in a lot of different ways, and we're not going to give him extra points because we know engineering is harder. So what are you going to do? The majority of people who enter undergrad as an engineering major thinking about pre-med do not come out a doctor, they come out an engineer. And for that reason, I have to put engineering into F tier. It's simply put one of the worst majors you can go into if you're actually planning on becoming a doctor in the future. Next on the list, we have a major, or really a set of majors that we've mentioned a couple times in this video so far, and we're going to have to keep referencing it in the future to use it as like a baseline point. That is going to be our biology, chemistry, and life science majors. Simply put, these majors do an excellent job of preparing you for med school. There's a reason they're the most popular majors for pre-meds. They're extremely useful in preparing you for the MCAT, which is a huge time save because if you're learning a lot of these core concepts that will benefit you when you have to take the MCAT in college, you've learned them ahead of time, then now you can tailor your preparation to be more focused on the concepts that you're actually struggling with, that you don't know. You can truly advance the level at which you're studying for this test, and in the end get a better score. The MCAT is not like the SAT. This is not an exam that's going to be done at like a low level where everyone's scoring in the top brackets. No. Nobody really is out here scoring perfect scores on the MCAT. If you truly put in way more work than your peers and you're setting yourself up for success, then the possibility of you getting a really top score and then getting into a good med school later on is so great. Use this to your advantage. It's also not that hard to keep up a strong GPA with this major, especially in comparison with things like engineering and CS. I'm currently a biology major at my school as part of like the BSMD program that I'm in. I'm telling you right now, it's work to keep a 4.0. But it's not impossible. In my first semester of college, I've been able to do it. I'm on track to do it again in my second semester. You can make it happen. And when you have that juicy 4.0 high MCAT score, and then the next thing we're about to talk about, the benefits of being able to go into research and use this bio or chemistry major knowledge in order to back up some of the good quality research that you're doing, you can start building the foundation for an exceptional med school resume. Don't let the popularity of this major fool you. A lot of times I've seen this on the internet where people bring up like these really wonky, weird statistics. People did this in my high school as well, like some of the teachers, and this was very surprising to me. They'll show you some statistic chart, like, oh, like, you know, physics majors actually have the best MCAT score in comparison to like biology and chemistry majors, and so you should become a physics major for, you know, your undergrad when you apply as a pre-med. Don't buy into any of that, okay? The real truth is, because the majority of people become a biology major or a chemistry major for pre-med, the numbers are just not in favor for any of these statistics. So if you see anyone trying to argue that like people who are this weird, super specific major have better odds of getting into med school, just know that that's not the case, okay? Everyone, even the kids who are on the lowest end and the highest end of the spectrum, are just doing a biology major, and because of that, statistically, it might seem like it's somewhere in the middle, but trust the process, it'll work out in the end. For these reasons, I'm going to be ranking the biology and life science majors as an A tier option. Now within these, just to give you guys a little bit more perspective, I would put biology at A tier, but I'd probably put something like chemistry at like A-, just because doing a chemistry major happens to be a little bit more difficult than a biology major, especially if you're coming into college without like that much grasp of either. I'm telling you right now, biology will be easier to pick up than chemistry. However, if you have a talent for chemistry and you're interested in chemistry, then by all means go for chemistry, because you have that background knowledge, you'll truly be able to succeed in those courses. Next on the list, we have BSMD, integrated medical programs. I've probably said this twice in the video here, so if you're not familiar, there are a set of pre-med programs that are out there that are available that give you direct admission to med school. You spend 3 or 4 years doing an undergrad at some college, you finish a basic set of requirements, and as part of your admission into the program, you are guaranteed a spot in the medical school as long as you fulfill the requirements. So I'm currently enrolled in a BSMD program with Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute and Albany Medical College. It's a 7-year program that's accelerated, right? Because traditionally you'd spend 4 years in pre-med, 4 years in med school. This is a 7-year program where as long as I complete the basic requirements of the program, I maintain a 3.5 GPA, I perform one summer research internship with Albany Medical College, and in total I accrue over 3 years around 400 hours of medically related experiences or volunteerings, or I'm engaged in some clubs in school, then I am guaranteed a spot in med school. Off rip, these programs are S tier. Simply because you are guaranteed a spot in med school. The amount of time and freedom that it enables is immeasurable compared to a traditional pre-med. My program has no MCAT requirements, so I have no need to study for the MCAT, and mainly, if we're thinking about long-term becoming a doctor, BSMD programs allow you to pursue whatever interests you want. That's the main purpose, is that you can go ahead and pursue things that you wouldn't be able to as a traditional pre-med. I have friends who are sitting and taking like songwriting classes simply because they can. It's an interest of theirs. Now, generally speaking, the goal of a BSMD program is not to just like do like random stuff, but you have the luxury of being able to pursue whatever research, volunteering, summer abroad programs that you want to. For me, I'm sitting here doing YouTube only because I'm in a BSMD program. If I was in a pre-med program, I'd be sitting here like studying for the MCAT. I don't have time to do things like this, but BSMD programs allow you to really grow, and because of these lax requirements, it's truly the best option if you're able to have a resume competitive enough to get in. Next on the list, I want to discuss a set of programs that is not often talked about, but I feel like it's extremely important to develop on awareness and recognition that they exist. These are, for lack of a politically correct term, I'm going to call them off-brand BSMD programs. There are a set of programs out there that I believe are a little bit malicious towards students and put in place purely for the med school's advantage. And with these BSMD programs, they're marketed as the traditional BSMD programs that we just talked about. They almost portray it in a way that you can guaranteed get into med school, you have all the advantages of a BSMD program, but for some reason, they're just way easier to get into. Here's the deal with these programs. First, we need to talk about how to identify them. If the program is talking on their website and they are not guaranteeing you a spot in their med school, they are only guaranteeing you an interview, it's likely one of these off-brand programs that we talked about. Secondly, if the program is accepting more than 100 students, if they accept around 100 to 200 students, they are not BSMD programs. I'm going to be attending Albany Medical School in about 3 years. My class size for my entire grade at Albany Medical College is not even going to be 200 students. Typically, BSMD programs will only accept at a maximum 25 students, and the BSMD program will always have an acceptance rate of less than 5%. The only exception to this rule is Brown Plemy, which accepts 60 students, but the acceptance rate is still like 1 to 2%. It's something ridiculous like that. If the program looks too good to be true, it probably is. Now, Pratik, why are you going so hard on these programs? What is so malicious about them? The reason I'm advocating so strongly against them is because here's the deal. You will attend one of these programs as one out of 150 students with the thought that, okay, I am guaranteed to get at least an interview for this medical college. And if I just try hard enough in the interview, then I'll get in and boom, I've saved all this time. Here's the deal. The school has 150 students who are also trying to compete for this spot just like you. But they only have 30 interview seats. So at every possible opportunity, they will try to kick you out of the program. You have to be grinding your ass off. You have to be on your A game in order to stay in the program. A lot of times they will have extremely high GPA requirements. You have to be doing volunteering and research and shadowing to stay competitive. A lot of times you'll even need to take the MCAT and get a good quality score in order to even qualify for that interview. And then what? You can show up to the interview and the program has not guaranteed you a spot in their med school. If they're looking at your resume and they're like, well, we could probably get just a regular candidate to our med school who's better than the student. We don't want them. We're just going to reject them. What are you going to do? A lot of times, programs that have these schools have mediocre med schools and really shitty middle of nowhere undergrads. If you are one of the 75%, 80% of students who gets cut from this program, what happens to you? Think about it this way. Let's look at the best case scenario here. You go through this program, you grind super hard, and then you get into a mediocre med school. I'm using this word mediocre not as an attack against the people who are in this program, but rather to give you a little bit of perspective here. There's no like top 25 med school that has an off-brand BSMD program. Only the lower end med schools will offer these programs simply because they're trying to use this as a tactic to finesse higher quality students, right? That's why they accept a bunch of kids, make you work super hard, farm the students, and then use their statistics to like boost their overall med school and bring in good quality talent out of this group. So as a student in this program, you're working super hard only to build an application that's just as good, if not better, than other pre-med candidates in other places to go to this med school. Don't you think that if you were to work this hard during your undergrad, you could just apply to other med schools and then get into a better med school? A lot of times the local state med school, at least if you live on like the West Coast, for Oregon we have OHSU, Washington has University of Washington, California has a plethora of med schools. All of these schools are superior to these off-brand BSMD programs that you'll find, and that's the best case scenario. We just talked about the worst case scenario. You get cut from the program and now you're stuck in the middle of nowhere, some random pre-med school that does not have the opportunities to truly properly prepare you for the MCAT, for med school, building a strong foundation. They don't have great access to resources. Simply put, you're screwed. In my opinion, you're truly better off just doing a traditional pre-med pathway and getting out of this entire rat race. Off-brand BSMD programs are going into the D tier. Next on the list, we have business majors. This is actually a surprisingly kind of interesting major pathway that you can go down. For the people that I've talked to in business majors, and honestly, if you just live on the internet, you know, doing a business major is not that difficult. It's not that rigorous or time consuming, even at some of the upper, like top tier business programs. But if you're interested in going into medicine, some of the concepts that you learn are actually quite useful, especially if you want to go into like medical management later on, or even in med school, just the general knowledge of like business and economics and stuff, it's going to benefit you. However, we do have to acknowledge the fact that you are studying business and you want to become a doctor. So there is going to be some legwork that you have to do on your end in order to keep up the biology and chemistry knowledge that you need in order to excel on the MCAT and build that foundation for med school. It's also pretty easy to keep up a good GPA, and you have enough free time to pursue these different extracurriculars and this extra support that you need to do with the sciences. And that's the difference between this and something like CS. For all of these reasons, I think business majors should be ranked somewhere around C tier, right? They're passable. Psychology is quite an interesting major and field. It's kind of easy to see why people are drawn to it. You have pretty reasonable abilities to go out and succeed in the sciences. It's setting you up pretty well for that. Psychology has some level of connectedness to biology, but do keep in mind the emphasis is going to be a little bit more on like neuroscience and stuff because it is psychology. Here's the one interesting thing about psychology. We talked about a little bit earlier in the video the fact that like biology majors might not have the best job prospects. Psychology majors, yikes. The good news is you have enough support in your education in order to go out there and like succeed as a psych major. Your prospects of getting into med school are pretty good, and for that reason, we're going to put psychology in the B tier. Math majors, off rip, we're gonna have to dump this into F tier. It's very similar to engineering, but let's talk about math for a second. The math concepts that you learn are not going to be useful in med school. They're not going to be useful on the MCAT, and they are hard. People who study math majors, especially if you're going to become a math major in like a really good quality school, if you go to a place like Stanford, you have some of the best talent in the world showing up. It can be really hard to keep a good GPA, it's not going to be as fun as you think, and it's just not useful. Finding even a single benefit of becoming a math major, other than the fact that you love math, is just non-existent. And if you love math that much, why are you becoming a doctor? You know what I mean? Like, you gotta understand where to draw the line. The social sciences, things like English majors, history majors, these are quite interesting for like pre-med. Here's the deal, there's not going to be a lot of overlap in general with med school curriculum, but there is like a critical reading and reasoning section on the MCAT exam, which these majors might do a decent job in preparing you for. But here's the deal, for me personally, I took a ton of IB higher level English and history classes in high school. I studied it very in depth, and after going from that kind of very social science heavy curriculum in high school and then coming to college, I was surprised with how little practical use the knowledge actually had. Like, I actually enjoyed those courses, but here's the deal. When you're in STEM, when you're in the sciences, the application of those concepts is very, very little. Yes, it's useful to have good writing skills, and when you look around the world and you're able to like break down like marketing schemes in your mind and you're like, oh, I understand what they're doing, like that's pretty sick. Yeah, it's cool, like you can sound smart. But you could just learn all of these things like in your free time. Like you can learn how to become a good writer by watching YouTube videos. You don't have to become an English major for that. And because of the kind of minimal prospects that this would even have, we're gonna stick social sciences in the C tier. Last but definitely not least on our list, we have a sleeper pre-med program. There are a set of programs out there called BSDO programs. It's very similar to BSMD programs, except instead of going to a traditional medical school after 4 years, you are guaranteed a spot in an osteopathic medical school where you'll graduate and become a DO. The reason that this program is going to be going in the A tier on our list is because you are guaranteed a spot in an osteopathic medical school. If this is a program that you're interested in going down, at the end of the day, you will become a doctor. You still, especially in the modern day, the way it's trending, DOs have very similar residency prospects as doctors. You will still be a fully functioning doctor. You're just a DO, and these programs are easier to get into BSMD programs. You have all the same advantages. They are a great backup option. If it's something you're potentially interested in, then I'd say definitely look into it. Now, some people off the bat, they do not like DO programs. The reason that I've used the picture of Hassan Minhaj, like if you know, you know, like bro has like a comedy piece where he just like completely shits on DOs. But here's the deal, like aside from like the jokes and stuff, being a DO is absolutely a respectable profession. Like you are a doctor at the end of the day, and you're still getting paid good quality salaries. So if you want to have a backup option, I highly recommend doing this. I applied to one DO program with Juniata College and LECOM, Lake Erie College of Osteopathic Medicine. It's very well known in the DO community. This program, dude, I didn't have to write one essay, super easy to get into. I just applied to it like one afternoon and I got my acceptance back super early. So it was like a nice comforting factor that in like October or November of college app season, before people even applied to schools, I already had acceptance to a backup DO program. I highly recommend you just go ahead and shoot your shot. Like, what do you have to lose? To close up this video, just keep in mind that everything I've talked about here, these are all just my opinions. At the end of the day, I'm trying to keep it as objective as possible, and that means I'm not able to account for things like your actual interests and your talents, which do matter in the real world. You're going to be in this major for 4 years, so we'd prefer if you enjoy your time in college. I hope you all learned something from this video. Thank you all for watching. Like, comment, subscribe. I'm out.